of Thursday this week, we're going to do it on a different day, given logistic schedules, football season coming up. And today is again another really interesting conversation with a great photographer from our Lone Star of Texas, Austin, Texas. Please welcome Randal Ford. Randal, welcome to Earth is a Witness. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Before I talk a little bit about what today's topic is and introduce you, a bit more, also want to welcome our artist in residence, Art Wolf. Art, welcome once again.
Thank you.
It's always to have you join, and happy birthday belated by 1 day. Yesterday was your birthday.
My God, 45 doesn't come around often, so good.
Great. You don't look 45. You don't. I might
know that's the problem.
Good to have you. This is Randal. This is gonna hallmark is yes, photography, but it's an excuse just to have fun, right? Right, Art. Right,
I love it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love it.
Well, and to learn.
As we get started, let me just tell you a bit of a backstory for today's episode and a bit about our new friend Randal Ford. A few weeks back or so, I was in Amazon. I came across this beautiful book called The Animal Kingdom. It's a gorgeous book, and it just struck me as how beautiful the portraits are. And I skimmed through it, and it has some images of about 150 of our species that we share the planet Earth with. What's remarkable, I'll tell you, is how emotionally engaging these images are. Yes, the cover has, obviously the tiger, is a beautiful animal, but beyond that also has lovely portraits of, farm animals, cows and, pigeons and birds and pigs. And what struck me was, the personality of each of these characters that comes through in the way it's captured. And I literally picked up the phone. I said, we got to talk to this guy. So talked to Randal, learned a little bit about him, is that he is, yes, from, lives in Austin, but unfortunately went to not the best school in Austin. He went to Texas A&M. He's an Aggie. And I went to Lone Star. I went to UT Austin. I'm from a better school. So I said, well, do I even want to talk to him at that? He's not from the same league. You know what I mean?
Let the Aggie jokes begin.
Yeah, the Aggie riff, the Aggie roast begins. Like Aggie and Longhorns are, rivals. But then he said, my work is good, my images are good, they're better than mine for sure. So I said we became friends. And here we are, banter aside. Then he told me he's also coming up with a new book very soon, which is called Good Dog. And then he shared some portraits of the good dog. And my God, I have to remind everyone right now, this is the time, if your kids are watching, please kick them out. Because if they see this, they will be insisting that you get a dog. They're such beautiful images. And as Earth is a Witness, on behalf of Art and I, we have no liability whatsoever if your kids insist in getting you a dog after seeing these images. With that introduction, Randal, once again, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you. And we can't wait to see some of the images and the stories behind the images of the Animal Kingdom, and also The Good Dog, a book that is coming out that we will talk about here.
Thank you. I appreciate that introduction. Yeah, it's great to be here.
So Art, any questions for Randal and the audience before we get started?
No, I want to see photos. Let's go.
Okay.
Randal,
let's get into animals.
All right.
I'm gonna share my screen here.
Yeah.
And all right. So you can see my screen okay, I assume?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Perfect.
So when most animal photographers or most studio photographers, when they start photographing animals, the first animals they photograph typically are dogs and cats. That didn't happen for me. I came from a background as an ad photographer and still am an ad photographer. And I was, at the time that I photographed this shot of this dairy cow, I was very much into portraits of people on these bright poppy colored backgrounds. And I had them, I lit them with strobes and tried to give them like a really nice, crisp, clean feeling to them. And as I mentioned, I had never photographed animals before, and Pentagram Design, which is based in Austin, Texas, they came to me and they said, "Hey, we want to photograph portraits of dairy cows like you photograph portraits of people." And I just was like, "Huh, okay, let's try it." And so on a cold, rainy day in November, in the middle of nowhere, Texas, we went to this farmer's place that had, I think he had six or seven show cows, and we photographed these show cows on bright colored backgrounds, and we used strobes, and I shot with a medium format camera, and in a sense, we sort of created these cow portraits, these portraits of dairy cows in a light that they hadn't been seen before. And they sort of, in the design community, went viral to a degree, and we're sort of kind of picked up with you know, a lot of folks enjoyed them, I guess. And what was also interesting, though, is that this was for a redesign of a magazine called Dairy Today, which is like it's for the dairy farmers. And Pentagram, as I mentioned earlier, Pentagram was doing this design. And as artists and photographers, we want to make photos that are interesting and visually engaging. We're not necessarily thinking about how this animal should look to the farmer. And when the farmers first saw these photographs and on these pastel colored backgrounds, I think they were taken aback a little bit, like, whoa, like what's going on here with these cows on a turquoise background? We even photographed a calf on a pink background. And so in that regard, the farmers didn't necessarily get it, so to speak, but the design community did. And this was sort of the start of my career creating portraits of animals. And you talk about earlier you going to UT and then me going to Texas A&M, and the Texas A&M, we're what's called Aggies, which comes from agriculture. So I guess it's only fitting that an Aggie started out his career as an animal photographer, photographing dairy cows and not, tigers. So this is the inception of my animal portraits.
It's a beautiful image.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
What kind? That's a Jersey cow, right? That's called a Jersey.
So this is a Holstein cow, and
I knew that.
As a photographer, I know way too much about cows. But they were surprisingly a blast to work with, and we got expressions like this where you see a twinkle in their eye, and then they do something with their tongue or move their head this direction, and all of a sudden it starts to feel a little human-like. And that humanization or anthropomorphization was sort of hallmark in the initial part of my career. And then as I transitioned to more animal portraits, I tried to take the work even beyond anthropomorphism. I'm going to say humanization, in a sense where I wanted to create these portraits that connect with the viewer, that we not only see a human expression, but we see ourselves in these animals. And so that was sort of the direction that I took my career as an animal portrait photographer. So stop me if you guys have questions at any point.
Well, I think you did really well with that one word, which is one of the hardest words to pronounce. Anthropomorphism. Anyway, exactly. I have to when I give that talk, I just like you kind of avoid saying it.
Yeah, humanization.
I love the intensity of this image. It is so tuned into you as the photographer.
Thank you. And that's I mentioned earlier to try to go beyond humanization, and when we look into this Bengal tiger's eyes, I think everybody feels something a little bit different. I certainly am in awe of the majesty and just the power of a tiger, but I also see something deeper in this tiger's eyes. Call it soul, call it feeling, call it whatever you want, but there's something that I see in this tiger's eyes, and my thesis, so to speak, is that I'm seeing a reflection of myself, and my thoughts and my feelings, and it feels sort of like a mutual projection of with this animal. And so that connection with the eyes, it's not in all of my animal portraits, but it's in a lot of them, and I think it's a cornerstone, I guess, to my animal portrait photography.
I got to say a bit of a backstory here. When Randall and I were talking on the phone about, his body of work and this image, and he mentioned this, that's the concept behind this work, is that you sort of see, what's going on in your head, and you sort of reflect that in the eyes. My first instinct was, my God, I find this tiger extremely handsome, spiritual, deep, majestic, all the qualities I would associate with me. I'm just saying.
Well said. Well said.
And so other people may read something different. When I look at this shot, this is one of the most powerful land animals on the planet, and yet the expression is like it is innocently looking into our eyes, knowing that we actually can control its future, that its wild brethren are really at the mercy of humans and our desires to protect what's left of this great creature. And in fact, in India, they're growing numbers by, I think, 10% a year. So that's the good story about tigers.
Yeah,
and
excellent.
I've been, in the wild, of course, many, many times, including just late last year, where a mother with two cubs literally walked right by an open air vehicle where easily we're looking eye to eye. So these are powerful animals. And yet in this excellent portrait, Randall, I think that connection to the viewer is inescapable. So as you look at it and you say it's like reflecting your own personality or your own humanism, that animal is looking into all of our eyes. And I think that's a hallmark of a very good photo, when that emotional connection is made.
Yeah.
Very well said. Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and so this was, it was interesting. I had photographed, after I photographed the cows, I did some work for some different pet brands where I photographed some dogs and cats. But I really had this yearning to photograph some predators. And so on this day that I photographed Shika, this is Shika, the Bengal tiger. On this day that I photographed Shika, I also photographed a lion and a bear. And so that was my Lions and Tigers and Bears Day, which was, I joke, I said I wanted to do the Wizard of Oz trifecta, but it was so my work is shot in studio. There's no way around it. It's part of my process and whatnot. But which allows me to be so close to these animals, and being within 5 to 6 feet of this Bengal tiger was unlike anything I had ever experienced. And seeing the animal in that regard was unlike anything I've ever experienced. It was an amazing experience.
Yep.
So Shika ended up being the cover for my book, which was released in 2018. And when the selection for the cover came up, there was some debate between myself, the designer, and the publisher. And so I had a selection. I had a favorite. The designer had a favorite, and the publisher had a favorite. And the publisher has the final say. And so this is what they chose. And at the time, I was kind of bummed that they didn't choose what I wanted. But looking at it now, and after seeing it on the stands, I saw why they chose that, and it was the right choice. And it was hard to see that at the time, but it was a good choice. So
it is, I'm a testament to that, since I literally picked up the book, dozens of best-selling books, but this one just stood out. So
thank you. So you know, some of my work is serious. Some of it kind of is a little bit more playful. This chimpanzee pose was inspired by Auguste Rodin's The Thinker pose. And so going back to this humanization of animals, I wanted to kind of play with it here. And I just felt like it was, you know, obviously we're so close to these, to chimpanzees from a DNA perspective that I felt like it was really important that I try and capture something from a, you know, with a certain human-like pose. And so I did the Thinker pose, inspired by Rodin. And then I also did this, which was inspired by Burt Reynolds in the 1972 issue of Cosmopolitan. I don't know if you guys remember that photograph of Burt Reynolds lying on its side. So, you know, my work, you know, I think the work like the dairy cows have a humorous element, and some of these have a humorous element. And so I kind of swim back and forth from, like, you know, some more serious evocative pieces to some more humorous pieces that are a little bit louder and a little bit more, you know, engaging in a warm-hearted way. So going back to the cows, after I did these bright colored portraits of dairy cows on bright colored backgrounds, I was working with a gallerist at the time, and he said, you know, why don't you consider photographing like a black cow on a black background? And I thought, oh man, that would be really cool. And so I had this client that I photographed his cows out of his ranch. He's got a gorgeous ranch in a couple hours northeast of Austin. And I was up there. I said, hey, could I photograph one of your cows, like in the ring where they auction the cows off or whatever? And he said, yeah, absolutely. So we got this bull in there, and I set up a black background, and I set up my lights, and I was able to capture this portrait of this black cow on a black background. And this was the start of this series of black animals on black backgrounds. And I just called it the Black Collection. And it was sort of an experimentation of, you know, photographing this black animal on a black background and kind of playing with the tonal range, or a kind of a minimal tonal range that you have there. Whereas the animals on the white or light gray backgrounds, there's such a stark contrast between them and the background. Whereas this is like letting them fade into the background a little bit. And it became an aesthetic that I came to kind of chase after a little bit, depending on the animals that I photographed.
And did you intentionally, I mean, obviously you intentionally left, what is it, like just caked dirt on the head? What is that?
Yeah, it's just caked dirt, and then he's got drool. Obviously, you can see that.
Yeah. I mean, what was your thinking behind leaving that on, where obviously you've kind of softened the background and blended the body in with the background? So you wanted that kind of authenticity or earthiness to it?
Yeah, you know, it's funny because a lot of the animals that I photographed, I do some polishing in Photoshop where I clean them up. Like the first dairy cow that I showed you, I had cleaned, you know, dirt and stuff off of that dairy cow. But this one, I felt like it needed that grit and that authenticity and that kind of just textural feel to it.
Okay.
So it's something that I wish that I could fake that almost, but I can't. Because so many animals out in the wild, they get messy and muddy and dirty, and
well,
that's an authenticity that's part of it. But so,
well, I totally agree with that. And when I've photographed Cape buffalo, the more muddy and caked the mud on it, the more character the animal has. So when I asked, I thought I knew the answer, but I just wanted to affirm what you're going to say, and you answered it as I expected.
Well, when I was creating the book, or kind of in the final stages of the animal kingdom, I really wanted to photograph a Cape buffalo. But the problem is photographing a Cape buffalo in any sort of confined or controlled space is basically, from what I understand, is impossible unless you know any that are halter broke, like cows over here.
No, they are indeed a force to be
Wild.
reckoned with.
Yes, that's what I. That's
So
what
if
I
you
do.
ever photograph Paramal,
Oh,
you
that's
probably would want to remove the drool.
Oh yes, for sure. That's already been.
Yeah.
That's already been negotiated.
Yeah. Okay.
so we got to plan
So-
art for that. I'm going to fly to Austin, and Randall's going to make me look like a total stud. That's the plan. We got to.
That's a lot of Photoshop, I'll tell you.
A literal stud. I've photographed many horses.
Then we'll put them out to pasture. This is beautiful.
Exactly.
I love the movement of the eye on this rooster. I mean, the feathers, the way it
Thank
curls
you.
around the body. There's a beautiful S curve in that, as you well know. So talk about
Thank
this one.
you.
This is
Well, so when I went down this road of photographing black animals on black backgrounds, I came across these black roosters, and they're called ayam samanis, and I believe they're originally from Indonesia. And I did a little bit of Googling to see if anybody in Texas had these ayam samanis, and I found a lady out in East Texas that had exotic chickens, and this was one of the breeds that she had. And I called her up and I just told her what I was doing. And I asked her if I could photograph one of her black roosters for my book. And she said, yeah, come on out here. And so we packed up the gear and we drove to East Texas and built a little makeshift studio in the living room of this person's house in East Texas that I had just met, and photographed portraits of her exotic chickens. And this is probably one of my favorite photographs in the book. It doesn't have the engagement of the eyes that we talked about earlier, but it's got such a textural feel to it with the cone and the beak and everything being this kind of in this world of black tones. And yeah, so one of my favorites. You do get a little bit of iridescent green in the plumage, but this has been one of my favorites. So
yeah, it was great.
So here, another animal that I absolutely wanted to photograph on black is this black panther. And when I saw the black panther initially, I didn't even notice the spots. And then when I started photographing him and seeing the images pop up on my computer screen, I saw the contrast, the subtle contrast between the black spots and his regular coat. And that's something I really tried to highlight and to focus on, in addition to his green eyes. But I guess it's funny, I guess his whiskers also have this kind of pop off of this background because there's such a minimal tonal range of whites that are in these shots. So
It's amazing. Beautiful. Ooh.
So this is one of my favorites as well. So this is Jabari, and this was a lion yearling. And a lot of people ask, like, did you shave his head so he could have this mohawk? And we were like, no, of course not. But he's a yearling, so his mane is just growing in, and it was such a unique stage of this lion's life to capture this. But to me, it feels like a messy teenager that you're begging to go clean up his room and take a shower and do its homework. But it has those eyes too that are engaging with us. So I don't know what they're saying to me, but what about you guys?
I can
You
relate
know
to
what?
it.
What I really like about this image is it's so perfectly symmetrical. It's so
Yes.
intent on you, and it's just perfectly symmetrical. And that's the first thing I respond to. I would call that a full hawk rather than a mohawk. It's not quite,
Well said.
but yeah, no, it's the beiges, the blacks, the whites, everything really works well in this image.
Thank
Very,
you.
very
Thank
nice.
you.
My reaction, I think, and when we spoke, Randall, I love this image. It's my favorite. In fact, you and I spoke. This could also be a great cover, and I can relate to the teenager comment because I got one who, after much listening, is finally showering, and this image speaks to me in exactly the same way because I got a teenager. It's like at times he's messy, he's frustrating, but in the end, is very adorable. That
Absolutely.
image speaks to me as well. It's a beautiful.
Yeah,
image.
when they look, they look you in your eyes, and it's.
Yeah.
So the all the big cats that I photographed, there's a feeling of being this close to them and with them that is just unlike anything else. But this mountain lion scared me a bit. When I'm working with a mountain lion, I had like a makeshift studio, and when I'm working with this mountain lion, they're feeding him chicken on a stick, like literally like hunks of raw chicken on a stick, so he will stay there for a few seconds while I photograph him. And like a domestic house cat, big cats, Art, I'm sure you've seen this, big cats use their hands to swipe at stuff and to, grab stuff. And he's grabbing this chicken, this hunk of chicken to put it in its mouth, but instead of it going into its mouth, he swipes at it and it lands out at my feet. And this big cat jumps off of the platform that he was on and comes down at my feet to eat this hunk of chicken. And I was working with his owner, and his owner was like, "Relax, he just wants the chicken. He's not going to get you." But I felt this wave of fear come over me, and I just took a deep breath, and I was like, "Whatever you do, don't move." And so anyways, but the one on the left was when he was about to pounce on me, and the one on the right is kind of a more regal portrait that is stylistically in line with some of the stuff from earlier. This is also this is a bird that I photographed at the last minute to include in my book, The Animal Kingdom. I was vaguely familiar with the symbolic nature of a black swan, that being an unprecedented event with global ramifications that drastically changes the course of history. And I really didn't know the idea of a black swan that well at the time, but when this whole COVID thing hit, it was like, wow, this is what a black swan is. It's an event that people didn't see coming. I mean, some people did see coming, but for the most part, we didn't see coming. We weren't prepared for. It's had unexpected ramifications on a global level, and so I'm so glad that I included this, that I, made an effort to find a black swan that I could photograph to include in the book, just because of the symbolism of it. But this is, from a lighting perspective, what I tried to do is I tried to create a soft light coming from camera right. And then I wanted to highlight the shape of the curve. And so I used a little bit harder source to create a little bit of edge light that just broke it apart from that background just a little bit. So
it's beautiful, really nice.
At any point, stop me or interrupt. But then again, the birds, this is Amelia on the left and Alejandra on the right. The birds brought so much color and so much detail to the book that it was without these birds, I wouldn't have the vibrancy in this series. They're just amazing.
Just a lovely image. Can I ask you a question? They all have names, is it? They all have names?
They all have names, and if the animals that I photographed didn't have a name, we gave them a name. And the reason I did that is to further humanize the animals and to further, hopefully further create some sort of engagement of us with the animals. Because everybody we know has a name. And so, including our dogs and our cats and our, reptiles and whatever other pets we have at home, like they all have names. So like, I wanted to be clear that these animals have a name in order to create more emotional engagement. And in the book, underneath each photograph is the animal's name.
I have noticed that. In fact, anyone who wants to get the book, in fact, it has wonderful stories, the name and the stories for each animal. That's really very interesting, Randal. It almost gives it an idea.
Well, and this is Geronimo. I did not give him this name. This is his name. And another black on black piece where I was, experimenting with the subtleties of black on black backgrounds. And from from a technical perspective, this was a tough one, but those orange eyes were pretty poignant to me. It ended up being an important piece in the collection.
That could
Okay,
have made
so
a great cover too.
well, it's funny it's funny you mentioned that, Art, because the designer at Pentagram Design in Austin, they wanted to use this on the cover. But I can see why the publisher decided not to, just because of the, the tonal range just wasn't quite enough, I think, to jump off the newsstands. So, but it's at the front of the book.
It's a very powerful. It's a very striking image. I could also see potentially it could be a little polarizing, for people to buy this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Why would it be polarizing?
It just looks, again, this is just my subjective personal view, is we see this in kind of key art or titles of, games marketing, if you will, is if the goal is to sell a lot of books, you wanted to appeal to the widest audience. And sometimes something like this could be a little scary as a kid's book or a kid's gift, if it's a gifting book, for example.
Wow.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I'm sure that was the case. I mean, the Animal Kingdom is a general interest book, and the publisher wanted it to have a wide range of an audience. So if it was just a fine art book only, maybe, but
yeah.
I think they made the right choice. So in the fall of 2018, in the midst of me doing a bunch of PR stuff for the Animal Kingdom, the publisher emailed me and they said, "Hey, we're ready for your next book idea." And I was like, just taken aback. I mean, of course I'm honored to hear something like that, but at the same time, like, I'm exhausted from creating this first book and doing all the PR around it. So I was like, I don't know, guys. I don't know what I can do. Because I'm an advertising photographer as well. And so they're like, no, we want to hear your next idea. So think about it and get back to us. So I thought about it, and I was like, it's like, what can I do that would have, a wide audience as well, but also would be somewhat more manageable to photograph. And I was like, what if we did a book of dogs, a book of dog portraits? And so I went to the publisher and I said, let's do a book of dog portraits. And they were like, sure, let's do it. And so, that's when I started my next book. I started the making of Good Dog. And the Animal Kingdom I photographed over the course of, the bulk of it over the course of 3 to 5 years, with some even extending up into 10 years before. But this book I photographed all within the course of like 6 months. So it was a quick go around, but boy, it was an amazing journey meeting all these different dogs. So this is Merlin, our husky. I want to say cub, but our husky puppy.
It's beautiful. Oh.
And then this is Buckley. So Buckley is a long-haired liver Dalmatian. And in the book, I photographed a wide range. I photographed like rescue dogs and full-bred dogs like Buckley, and they all had their own unique personality and quirks that I tried to capture on camera. But there's something in dogs' eyes when they look at you that's even softer than like the Bengal tiger. They look at you with such a I guess like a partnership in a way, because they evolved to be around us, and the ones that survived evolution.
We actually made dogs, and so
right.
It's the only animal, and some people would refute this, but I'm right. It's the only animal that routinely seeks out human companionship. Cats will come get on your lap, but dogs seek out human companionship. And that's the only animal that does that. People can have a great relationship with their horse and other animals, but the dog we made out of wolves 40,000 years ago. And when this first came up, after seeing the pup, I instantly thought human. It's got that human-like quality of an older middle-aged man, and it's very soulful.
Thank you. That's so well said. I mean, our relationship with dogs is so special, and it's something that I tried to capture in this book. So on this could be a more serious or even more lighthearted shot, depending on how you look at it. But this is my fashion shot. This is my ode to Richard Avedon, or ode to the famous fashion photographers. And in the studio with dogs, I would use wind, not only to keep them cool, which helps them to not pant, but also to blow their hair if it was a long-haired dog like this. And this is one of those where the timing, I just kind of got lucky, where the wind was blowing her hair, and it had such a glamorous, Marilyn Monroe look to it.
Cool image.
And the poodles, it's funny. I mean, I didn't know any poodles well before this, but getting to know some of these poodles during this process was fascinating. And getting to know their owners, it's really a creative expression almost, that in a lot of times complements their personality. And so these are kind of in line with the fashiony photo that you saw before.
They're incredible. Going back to the previous image, the one on the right, what kind of dog is that?
These are both, I'm sorry for not clarifying that. These are both standard poodles.
Standard poodles. And
yes,
the one, it looks like a beard, but is that just the chest hair kind of blending in with the chin fur?
No, it's actually a beard.
Wow.
And so in the book, I have a profile in the book where you could see his entire beard.
So it's how groomers cut their hair that can make the difference between these two animals, because they don't look at all alike.
They're the same breed. So like Portia on the left has the long fluffy ears, and then CeeLo on the right has the short ears. Yeah, it's all very expressive through the style of grooming.
Wow.
Exact same breed.
It's the same example as Randall and I are the same species, yet one went to UT Austin, Longhorn, one went same stuff,
Just in case we forgot that Paramal's part of this conversation.
Yeah, it's okay. Folks from UT, they need to kind of keep telling themselves that to make themselves feel better.
Right. That's right.
Good one.
I mean, and so creativity. I mean, look at this. This is ridiculous. This dog is paparazzi. I'm not kidding. In drag.
Who's paparazzi?
This is paparazzi.
Oh, paparazzi. Okay. Yeah.
Even paparazzi's fingernails, nails are
yeah,
pointed.
I can see that one performing in gay clubs around the world.
Exactly.
Dude, we can't have nudity on this show.
Well, yep, he's got it all hanging out. So, boy, I knew I had to photograph a bloodhound for the book, and you could smell a bloodhound. I mean, considering bloodhounds are the ones that are out there smelling for blood, you could smell a bloodhound like a mile away. I mean, they have such an oily skin that emits this scent. It's amazing, and they are so big and they're so strong. And the way that we got this photograph is this is how bloodhounds are supposed to look for show. And so the owner would take kind of the coat on the top of his head and kind of pull it down a little bit and kind of scrunch it up around his eyes. And that was like the look for a bloodhound. And so I thought visually from our photograph, it looked pretty cool. So from a show perspective, they were also happy.
Well, in fact, is that how you found your way to most of these dogs, is through the shows and recommendations and all of that, of course? Great
question. So I did 4 days of photography in LA. I did 4 days of photography in Dallas, and I did 6 days of photography in Austin. And I worked with animal trainers in all 3 of those cities that I have good relationships with, and they helped me find these dogs. And so some of the animal trainers, they already had some dogs, but then some sought out some of these other dogs for me. Like I knew I want a Dalmatian. I know I want a bloodhound. I knew I wanted some wild poodles. So I worked with a range of different breeds through kind of a network of trainers, and some of those were show dogs.
So I would imagine that you got a book on dogs that was pretty pedestrian, but really showed all the various dogs on the planet. And then you found and you hoped to get some of the most dynamic, different creatures.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And so, there were some on the wish list that were hard to get and some were easy to get. Some, like a Tibetan Mastiff, which is just absolutely huge, were hard to find, but I did find one in Los Angeles that ended up being made for a really cool portrait.
Were the owners of the dogs just happy to have their dog included? Did some owners want money for the portraits, or what was that like?
Most of them were happy to have them included in the book. Because I already had the previous book that was for sale, they knew that it was, a legitimate deal and whatnot. So yeah, most of them were really just excited to be in the book. And some of them I needed to kind of help them get to where my studio was. So if they needed to travel, like I had this Samoyed puppy travel from San Diego to Los Angeles and kind of help them out with some of the costs just to get up there. But most of them were excited to be in the book.
And I would imagine anybody that owns dogs like this could be a book in and of themselves, because they're not going to be normal people. Let's be clear about that.
They're very passionate about dogs, but not just that. They're very passionate about their specific breed.
Oh.
So they want to see they're obsessed with Afghan hounds or Dalmatians, or Huskies, or the cover of the book, they're obsessed with Aussies. So
did you have to go and watch Best of Show a couple of times to prep you?
I did watch it and loved it. Yeah, there was definitely some of that behind the scenes happening in the book.
I did a book a couple of years ago called Dogs Make Us Human. And it was just photos that I took as I was normally traveling, but it was working dogs in Myanmar or mountain dogs in Tibet or hunting dogs in the Amazon. But everywhere humans are now, there are dogs. We never saw a culture that didn't have a dog as part of their community. So
isn't that fascinating?
Beautiful work.
Our relationship with them, it really is fascinating. So I hope that I captured a little bit of that essence.
Yeah, and Parimal, you were right. I think that when people see this work, they want the book. Now, is this book coming out in September, or what's the story?
This book, October 6th.
October 6th.
But
and
people
how many photos are in the book?
Say that again?
How many different types of breeds are in this book, would you say?
There's, I believe I photographed over 150 different dogs. So it's a 200-page book, and so even a little bit heftier than the first book. So here's the
nice.
And then I have a Dalmatian on the back. So
I got it.
Obviously bookstores around the country, but Amazon, and do you even have them on your own website?
Yeah, so Amazon will be selling them, and other bookstores like Barnes and Noble and boutique bookstores around the country. And then I will be selling a very limited amount of signed copies on my website. And the book comes out on October 6th.
Well, congratulations. It looks beautiful.
Thank you very much.
And Rizzoli is a very good publisher. They do great work. The paper is well done. Everything about their books is really well done.
Yeah, they've been great to work with. You know, as a photographer, it's hard to match what you see on film or on screen. It's hard to match that, you know, in the printed form in mass production. So they've done a good job at that, and we've worked hard with lots of press checks back and forth. So
I can see the foreword is from W. Bruce Cameron. I believe he was the author of A Dog's Purpose. Is that right?
that's correct. Yes. I was so excited to have Bruce write the foreword for the book, and it's an absolutely beautiful foreword.
I got to say, you know, I mean, I had a dog in India, a Doberman, growing up, and it is the most enriching experiences, you know, that I had growing up is to have a dog. And Art, you're so right and insightful, is that literally they make us human. I mean, we recognize, you know, so much of what we are in their eyes and vice versa. And these images are beautiful. So Randall, if someone wants to get a signed copy from you, the limited numbers you have, would you like them to sign up to your website on a newsletter, if you will, so that you can ship them something?
Yeah, that would be great. So if you want a signed copy, you could sign up for my newsletter on my website, which is randalford.art. And there's sign up links all over the site, so you can't miss it. And I'll be selling, you know, a limited amount of those signed copies to my email list to start with, and then I'll see how many I have left and go from there.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it's RANDAL1L randalford.art. And we'll obviously put that in the blurb. It's a beautiful book. You know, I think it'll also make a great gift, you know, as we look forward to, you know, upcoming Thanksgiving.
Do you really think that, Parimal, that it would make a great gift?
Yes.
You never thought about that, Randall.
Never. Rizzoli hasn't either.
Sarcasm. Of course, it's going to make a great gift. It should be everybody's Christmas tree.
Well,
Yes.
I'll tell you one of the great surprises of. Okay, so I've got. You know, I'm gonna show you both right here. So I got both right here. They're both the exact same copy, so they make a good companion. Exact same size. I mean. So they make a good companion. But let me. One of the coolest surprises was with the Animal Kingdom was seeing how much kids loved it. It almost became this like fancy kids picture book, and kids. I heard about it from kids from 2 years old to like 18 years old that were flipping through this book and enjoying these pictures of animals. So I loved that a demographic that I didn't necessarily shoot the book for has been able to enjoy and appreciate and fall in love with the Animal Kingdom more than even more than I have, hopefully.
Yeah, I did a TV show called Travels to the Edge, and one of our biggest demographic audiences were children. And in today's economy, science isn't the first thing people are learning in schools. And so books that show wildlife, TV shows that take people out, it's not a replacement for science curriculum in schools, but it helps. And it's great to know that kids are tuning into your the book on the Wild Kingdom.
Totally, yeah.
Randall, as we wrap this up, just a couple of questions. What was the most difficult animal to photograph of all these animals?
Oh man, so I've photographed, like I said, lions, tigers, bears, cows, horses, chickens. You name it. The hardest animal to photograph is our domestic house cats, because they're gonna do whatever they want to do. And I've got a few. I've worked with a few that are trained, but they are tough. And they're tough to find that like loving expression too that we see in our dog's eyes. So
it's amazing. It's interesting. I would not have predicted that.
Okay, what's your second question? Paramount.
Second question is, what did you learn through this process that now something you didn't know before you began on the journey?
Great question. I didn't have time to prepare for that question.
Impromptu question.
I'll say this. So I photographed the Animal Kingdom book, and everyone asked, like, did you gain a sense of appreciation for animals? And of course I did. Like, absolutely, being that close to these majestic animals, like a big cat, I definitely gained a sense of appreciation. After I finished, or throughout the course of the dog book, though, I gained a sense of appreciation that was even stronger than my appreciation for the wild animals. And that appreciation for dogs, I found in all different dogs. I found in the mutts, the full bred dogs, the service and therapy dogs, and I think the reason that I valued that so much is because of our relationship, the depth of our relationship with dogs, and that Art touched on earlier, and how unique that is. That no other animal in the world seeks out companionship with us. And so, from that regard, I didn't know that I had such a deep, profound appreciation and love for dogs. So.
All right.
Great. Thank you, Art. Any last comments before we wrap this up?
No, I just appreciate the work. I love the design element. I like white on white, black on black. I think it's a nice way of portraying these animals. So congratulations.
Thank you, Art. That means a lot coming from you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And with that, thanks a lot, Art. Thanks a lot, Randal. It's just beautiful images. I look forward to my own copy. And we do want to say thanks to all our audiences for tuning in live, and see you next week. Okay, thanks everyone.